Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us at today's webinar, which is Artificial Intelligence in Marketing, a Global Legal Perspective. Today's webinar is going to focus on Europe. The reason I say today's webinar is going to focus on Europe is that today's webinar is part of a three-part series that the International Advertising Association is presenting on artificial intelligence and the use of artificial intelligence in marketing around the world. We're going to, in the fall, do one on focusing on the Americas, and then later on in the year, we're going to sort of focus on Asia Pacific and some other areas around the world. Look, you pretty much can't be working in marketing. You pretty much can't be doing anything these days without talking about artificial intelligence. You talk to anybody who is working in this space as a lawyer, and every day clients are calling you and asking you one sort of artificial intelligence related question or another. So what we're going to do in this webinar series is really explore kind of honestly in real time the way people are thinking about how to use generative AI, how to promote the incorporation of AI into products, and other ways in which AI and marketing intersect. The reality is laws are changing fast, decisions are coming out. Some jurisdictions have more information than others. People are at different places about this. What your perspective is going to vary based on where you sort of sit in the sort of hierarchy of people in the marketing chain. And we want to talk about all of those things. This webinar series is part of a bunch of different things that the IA does to try to provide insights to marketers about the ways in which you can market in a logical way around the world. We realize that education is tremendously important for marketers to stay on the right side of the line, and so part of this is about education, but part of this is also, and probably even more important than the educational piece, what this is really about is this idea of being part of an ongoing and leading an ongoing dialogue as we help to think through these issues. And the reality is that what the legal landscape about AI is going to look like 3 years from now is going to look totally different than it looks right now. And as regulators, as courts, as self-regulation, as other stakeholders try to think about, well, hey, what do we want to do here? How do we want to engage with these issues? What are the right rules? IA really wants to be able to sort of getting the information out there from a lot of different perspectives so that the decision makers can make really smart decisions with full information. So anyway, so I am Jeff Greenbaum. I am the head of public policy at the IA. I wear various hats in my life, and one of those hats is that I'm also the chairman of the Global Advertising Lawyers Alliance, which is an alliance of advertising lawyers around the world. And not coincidentally, the folks on this webinar with me today are all members of the Global Advertising Lawyers Alliance. Jonas there from Switzerland, JJ from the UK, and Hanta from Turkey. And these are all people that I work with all the time who are incredible experts in advertising and related areas. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the time that we have together today to kind of give you, in a little bit of a freewheeling sort of way, some thoughts about AI. There's a lot to talk about. We could do a full day conference on this. We could go into lots of details, talking about it from lots of different perspectives. But what we've really tried to do is focus in mostly on thinking about what are the intellectual property issues that people are really thinking about that are at the forefront of people's minds right now as we think about the adoption of AI. We'll talk about some consumer protection issues, and then we'll talk about some related issues as well. Depending on what platform you're looking at this on, there's ways for you to ask questions. I can't explain to you how to do it, but if you can figure out how to do it, feel free to submit questions and we'll definitely answer them. And other than that, we're going to jump right in. So the way that we're going to do this is, there you go. We've got some slides here, which I do know how to move, and there's us. And so what we're going to do is we're going to kick off, and first, JJ is going to give a little bit of introduction. JJ Shah is from Lewis Silkin in the UK, and JJ is going to give us an introduction to AI. So we're all starting from the same place. And then he's going to jump right in and give us all of the answers about intellectual property, at least from a UK perspective, but taking a broader view as well. So JJ, why don't you kick it off?
Thanks so much, Jeff. Yeah, so let's not lay on the introductory slides too thick, because I'm sure many of you are sort of out there listening are going to be actively using these technologies, and you're going to be well versed in how they work. But I think it's fair to start by saying that the recent explosion in interest and adoption of AI, particularly amongst the public, comes in the form of what we call generative AI. So that's those platforms which are able to generate text and imagery and music and video in response to user prompts. And these all have the potential to sort of revolutionize the way in which we work and we create as a society, if indeed that revolution hasn't already started or happened. So they generally fall into sort of two broad buckets. So you have the text generators and AI chatbots, and then you have sort of broader media generators like image and video and music generation tools. And we'll go through a couple of examples now. And where better to start than with ChatGPT, which I'm sure we all know. So this was launched all the way back in November 2022 now, and this sort of set the world and the internet abuzz upon its release, and introduced us to this next generation of AI chatbot, owing to its ability to automatically generate these really quite complex and nuanced text answers, similar to that of a human being, really. And so when it was first released, it ran on some sort of a large language model called GPT 3.5. It now runs, if you pay for a subscription, you can get access to GPT 4, which is sort of the next iteration of that AI system, and it's a little bit smarter, a little bit more precise, and apparently even sort of GPT-5 is in the works as well. And I think ChatGPT's unique ability to factor in the context of a particular prompt and then respond appropriately is probably what set this tool apart from its AI ancestors. So you can ask it to tailor a response to make it funnier or more detailed, or even in the style of a particular author, and it's very good at generating that. And so this really kick-started this sort of new AI revolution. And then I think probably on the next slide then, so worth saying that the other models are available. So Microsoft launched its new Bing Chat back in February 2023, and this has now been rolled into its Microsoft Copilot suite of products. And this is actually powered by a slightly tweaked version of ChatGPT's GPT-4 model through this $1 million partnership between OpenAI and Microsoft. Google started with something called Bard, which has now been sort of rebranded as Google Gemini. That's a major competitor based on its completely own proprietary neural language model known as Lambda. And Facebook are also in the race. They have Llama, which was released on an open source basis, and other AI models include things like Anthropic's Claude, IBM Watson, and there are thousands of tools, frankly, which integrate these sorts of technologies. And it's probably worth saying that to classify these models as chatbots is already becoming a bit of a thing of the past. Very, very fast moving, but the latest versions of these models are what we call multimodal. So they can actually interpret and analyze pictures and video, text, speech, music, code, everything. So they're really, really powerful and sort of flexible, diverse tools. Worth just spending a couple of seconds on what large language models are, because it does start to color the legal issues a little bit. So the large language models that underpin these platforms essentially work by actually predicting the next word to generate in a sentence based on all of their training data and all of the input from the human user through the prompt, and indeed what the AI has just generated itself. So these AI chatbots, they actually utilize the same technology that you might recognize from the autocomplete function whenever you're sort of word processing or filling in forms using Google. It's essentially that same technology is just taken to the max, so it can do full paragraphs and and poems and things like that. And so at a very high level, these large language models are essentially trained on a massive volume of sample text in different languages and domains, billions of English language data points and other languages as well, inputted directly by humans, fed in as part of these massive data sets, and also just scraped from the internet. And so once the AI has sort of been fed with this data, the tool undergoes these periods of supervised learning where it's forced to sort of fit input and output data, and it's fine-tuned over time, being gradually optimized and rewarded for correct responses till we see the very advanced models that we have today. And so The other major category of generative AI tools are this new wave of powerful audio-visual generation tools, and many agencies and marketing departments at brands and advertisers are going to be using these to instantly create imagery for things like content and presentations and deliverables, marketing assets. And these include the likes of platforms such as Stable Diffusion or Midjourney or OpenAI's DALL-E 2, which you might have heard of. And they're really designed to take a text description or a prompt from a user and generate quite a complex image or visual asset that matches that prompt. So in terms of how they work, so similarly to the chatbots, really, I mean, as a first step, these tools have been trained on huge data sets of pairs of text and image this time, and that allows the AI to create connections between the structure, composition, and data within an image, and how that relates to the accompanying text. And so the AI model is then trained to be able to generate images from what's called random noise or static through a process called diffusion. So as you can see on screen from the rather crude image of this cat sort of appearing from thin air, the AI is given an image to which small amounts of random noise are progressively added, and this corrupts the image, destroys its structure until it essentially breaks down into random static. And this is all a learning process for the AI. And the AI model is then trained to essentially do the reverse, to sort of restore or create structure and recognizable images from this random static, which is how it formulates um, imagery from simple user prompts. And this, over time, is where we arrive. So we've now arrived at this is Midjourney 5, the latest iteration of the Midjourney AI image generation software. It was released last year. I think Midjourney 6 is again in the works or rumored to be. And certainly when Midjourney 5 came out, this made waves in the AI world because it was able to generate hands and fingers very convincingly, which is something that AI tools have really struggled with, and some of them still do. So, of course, in case there's any doubt that none of the people you see on screen are real, these are all AI generated people, astoundingly realistic. And I think they raise some really interesting ethical questions about how these tools might be used for good and creativity, or for evil or manipulative means. So straight on to IP then. So worth flagging at the very outset that IP in AI generated works is actually a really tricky area, and the usual rules, certainly under sort of UK and EU law around authorship and ownership, kind of break down, and they don't really square very neatly with this new technological ability to ask AI to create artwork almost instantly in response to human prompts. The law is sort of lagging behind the technology, as it so often does. So, maybe we do need to see a sort of IP law updated in time, or at least wait for guidance from the courts to resolve these issues through judgments. Um, but certainly in the UK, whenever we at Lewis Silkin are advising on IP issues relating to AI, we tend to sort of break the question down into these 3 bullets. So, is an AI generated asset actually protected by copyright? If it is, who owns the copyright? Is that you as the user who inputted the prompt, or is it the AI? Is it the machine? Is it the owner of the AI platform? And then if you're going to take your AI generated asset away and use it publicly, what are the risks of doing that? So there are confusingly different positions between the intellectual property regimes, probably of multiple jurisdictions, but certainly between the US, where a lot of the leading AI platforms are based and headquartered, and in my jurisdiction in the UK, where many of our clients are sort of asserting or claiming copyright in an asset. And Jeff will be better placed to speak to this than I am, but my understanding from in the US is that copyright is really not recognized in a purely AI generated work as it stands, and this has been sort of reiterated by the US Copyright Office. They published guidance in which it said that works generated by a prompt alone and created by an AI are just not registrable. However, sort of unusually, the UK does actually afford copyright protection to purely AI generated works. In our sort of local Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988, as the author of a computer generated work as the person by whom the arrangements necessary for the creation are undertaken. Worth saying that that person who made the arrangements necessary to create the AI work can never be the AI system itself. So ChatGPT, as the user or OpenAI as the owner of the system. But certainly our law is in the UK is set up to protect AI and copyright in AI works. So on the next slide then, assuming you are someone claiming, who has made the necessary arrangements to create an AI work? This is a really broad and untested and unclear question, certainly under UK law. And the answer really is probably going to depend and be very fact specific for each piece of art, the creative input from the human user. I think probably it's fair to say that where the process behind creating the AI generated image is mostly the result of the AI doing automated decision making with very minimal input from the user other than basic text prompts, then the safest starting point would be to assume that the AI, the output would probably be owned by the platform creator, the platform behind the AI. It's going to be a very hard argument for a human user to run that your simple prompt, which results in a beautiful and complex piece of art, is enough to make you the person who made the arrangements necessary for that work. It might be that is one day tested under UK or EU law, or maybe even in the another jurisdiction, but and that a prompt is truly creative and complex enough to make the human user the copyright owner. But certainly we recommend to our clients that the safest starting point is to assume that if copyright subsists in an AI work at all, it's probably going to be owned by the platform in the first instance. So on the next slide then, so assuming IP is owned by the AI, terms of service of the relevant AI platform are going to govern the commercial and the contractual rights that grant you as the user rights in the works that you create. So always really important to think about whether you're an agency or a brand or just an end user and you want to use the AI asset, what right related to content? Do you have a full assignment of the IP rights? Is it just a license? Are there any restrictions attached to that license? And if you're sad like me and you quite enjoy going through the terms and conditions of terms and conditions vary from platform to platform, and they often will have very different terms depending on whether I don't know, you pay for a license. Maybe you have an enterprise license or a pro membership, or whether you're just using it for free. The actual IP position and the exclusivity that you have over those assets, always really important to check the terms of service, certainly. And this becomes a particular issue in a marketing context, of course, because clients and advertisers, brands, they want to own deliverables. So they're often asking agencies, well, we will sign all of the IP and we want to own 100% of the deliverables. Of course, if the agency has been using AI in the background and there's a question as to whether they even have the rights to assign that AI asset over to the client, is there even any copyright in it? It's still wrestling with, and we're starting to see this start to be dealt with in contracts, which I think we'll come on to in a moment.
Well, actually, do you want to talk about that for a second? You want to talk a little bit about the way in which sort of advertisers and agencies are starting to address these concerns in contracts? Like, what are the recognizing that the ownership questions are sort of a question mark, though different depending on jurisdiction. Where is everyone thinking? How are people addressing the potential liability issues in contracts? So what's happening in the marketplace from that perspective?
Yeah, so I think, and I'm sure Jonas and Handa will have seen this too, but certainly from my perspective, there's been a bit of a real difference in approach. And so, I don't know, some agencies are receiving letters from clients who are very, very scared and of AI, or certainly want to take a very cautious approach. So they're saying, do not use AI at all in the chain. Risks are just too high. We don't want you using it at all. And you have other clients, to be honest, who are saying, look, we want to be forward looking. We consider ourselves forward thinking from a tech perspective, and we want to facilitate AI So we want to work with our agencies, and even internally, we want to allow our employees to embrace this technology, but we want you to do it safely. And there isn't really one immediate fix, but we're starting to see contractual clauses pop up, basically, sort of. So I think we focus a lot on ownership there, but what I was probably just hinting at there is the other really big IP sort of question that everyone seems to, and is really giving the marketing sector a bit of a headache, is around infringement. So like we covered before, so the key challenge with AI is that it's virtually impossible to know what data has been used to train these AI systems. These large language models have been trained on billions of data points. So sometimes they've just scraped it openly from the web, if reports are to be believed. And I think we can say with some certainty that someone like OpenAI absolutely has not cleared those rights with the billions of third-party rights holders worldwide to be able to do that and to train their systems on that content. And so the risk exists for anyone using AI materials publicly, that an AI generated materials might contain elements that are copied from third-party works without permission. And if you use that for commercial purposes, i.e. in an advertising campaign, that could constitute IP infringement, leave you exposed to legal action. And in practice, I think I'm happy to go on record as saying I think the risk of attracting an IP infringement claim is probably quite low in the most part. It's just generally going to be difficult for the original authors out there in the world to be able to recognize their own work in an image that has potentially been melded together from billions of data points, and that's if it catches their attention at all. But if we go to the next slide, Jeff, I think there are already lessons out there in the market, no less so than Getty Images, that they are currently bringing proceedings in both the US and the UK against Stability AI, which is the AI company behind the Stable Diffusion tool, in relation to its alleged training of AI systems on Getty's image library without permission. And one output relied on by Getty is this image, which you can see on screen, which is quite similar to the photo in the Getty library of Christian Eriksen for Tottenham being tackled by Jordan Henderson. But the smoking gun here, of course, is that the image that was spat out by the AI system even sort of has the mangled Getty image watermark on it. So
can you talk more about what you think is going on here? Because this seems like a pretty unsophisticated output from an AI tool, right? I mean, this is not really what's supposed to. I mean, this looks like beginner ad agency doing some slight changes to try to avoid getting a license here. But what do you think is really going on here?
Yeah, I mean this was submitted, if I understand it, as evidence as part of the sort of the particulars of claim, and I think even what I think is going on here is that it's clearly possible to get the AI system to, with the right prompts, to create imagery that has clearly been trained or inspired by the Getty image library. I think it is a bit of a smoking gun. I think two things maybe in Stability AI's defense, certainly defenses that they are going to run in this case, is that Getty had to work quite hard or very hard to get the AI system to generate that as a piece of evidence. It wouldn't do that as part of the sort of an everyday user's use case. And the other argument from Stability AI's perspective is going to be, has the AI actually copied anything, or has it really just browsed or been inspired by an image it found online in the Getty Images case, just as a human internet user might do when looking for ideas, and then actually just created a new non-infringing image? So it's really interesting. We don't have the answers to this yet. We really hope that it proceeds to court and we get some judgments on it and it isn't settled, but it's probably the sort of the headline case in this area. And so final slide for me then. So this is really just, I think we kind of covered this before, but this really sort of burrows down into the headache that that we're seeing from a contractual perspective. It's it's not just clients wanting ownership over the IP assets where there's a big question mark over it. It's also it's very typical in client agency contracts for clients to ask agencies and other suppliers to warrant that absolutely nothing that they provide in the deliverables is going to infringe IP rights, and that's often backed by indemnities, sort of very strong contractual rights to recompense, the client pound for pound if that's breached. And this, of course, makes using AI generated materials troublesome, because everybody in the supply chain knows that, given the Getty case, it is perfectly possible that they may have generated assets that are, let's say, heavily inspired and potentially even copied from third-party sources. So again, this is another point of negotiation now for agencies using AI as part of their service delivery.
All right. Thanks, JJ. All right. So we'll come back at the end and circle back and talk about some more of these issues as we think about how to move forward. But now what we're going to do is we're going to switch sides and talk about sort of the other side of the coin here, which are the consumer protection issues. And Jonas Gassman from Vescher in Switzerland is going to kick things off.
Yes, happy to take over here. So as Jeff said, we kind of identified as a second issue the area of consumer protection, where we want to shed some further light on in the AI context. And to set the scene, let's first look at what consumer protection is about. So whereas the law and the rights of consumers are different across several jurisdictions, the principles are basically the same across all of these. And what you can see on the slides is just a summary of several principles. I will elaborate a bit on several of them. So first of all, it's about the protection of the weaker party, obviously the consumer. This also includes privacy. And this is also connected to the next point, to the redressing of imbalances of informational and market power. So the consumer, as the weaker party, should have some means to get some redressing here. And further key aspects of consumer protection in general are the regulated autonomy of consumers. So that means that they should have the ability to make decisions without any undue commercial influence. And the next one, the disclosure and transparency, is quite a big one and quite important. I will come back to that later. And there it's all about access to adequate information and to make their informed decisions based on that information. And the last one is the fairness and non-discrimination, another big one we are talking about in more detail in a couple of minutes. So it's all about the fair and equitable treatment during the whole relationship. Yes, thanks, Jeff. So with that in mind, or that scene in mind, let's now have a look at what specific interests rights are at stake in the AI context. So let's just have a look first at the privacy and data protection. There it's all about lawful and proportionate processing of personal data. And of course, there's a risk of breaching your data protection obligations. If you are an agency, for example, and you have some obligations towards your clients, then you should be mindful of that. And also, of course, of the personal data of other individuals involved. Then on the autonomy, there's really, it's all about the freedom of choice here and the ability to make, again, decisions without any undue commercial influence. And the fairness, there's like, it's threefold, I would say. So you have, as a consumer, you have the interest to have a fair algorithmic treatment. It's all about not to be subject to any unfair differentiated treatment. And secondly, you also want to have a fair algorithmic interaction. So you don't want to be misled, you don't want to be manipulated. And thirdly and lastly, you also do have a interest in fair, let's say, algorithmic or cognitive competition. So you are, as a consumer, interested in accessing data sources and algorithms which are available also to big players. And then talking about the transparency again with connection to the algorithm, it's all about knowing why a certain algorithmic answer or a decision has been made or given. And of course, the transparency in the fact that you are using AI where needed. So I will elaborate on that in a few minutes. And lastly, we have the empowerment. So it's all about there making the power, giving the power of AI, making it available to the society. So this is a roundup of the interests of consumers I see in the AI context. And here, let's now dig into the specific risks consumers face when they're getting in touch with AI in marketing. So there's a few typical risks actually in the AI context, and I want to focus on three of which you can see on the screen. The first one being the unfair and aggressive exploitative advertising. And here you should keep in mind the dark patterns. Many of you will probably know what dark patterns are. Dark patterns mean specific techniques or design elements which intentionally mislead, deceive, or trick users into something or some actions they didn't really want to have taken. Let's think here of sneaky maneuvers on websites and apps which make users click on something or sign up to something for services they didn't really want to sign up for. And dark patterns, they also can come with a data protection issue, meaning that if you as a user, as a consumer, provide more personal data than you actually intended to provide, that may be problematic from a data protection angle, obviously. And the exploitation angle of this is if you are exploiting vulnerabilities of consumers, let's say if you are tracking using advertising, then and you see that there's someone addicted to gaming, and you continue to display gaming adverts to him, this would be an example of such exploitation. And this, of course, can be problematic from a consumer protection angle. Then, as a second risk, I wanted to elaborate a bit more on the opacity and the inability to contest, which in my view is a twofold issue. So on the one side, you have the advertising nature. You should always make clear to consumers that it is about advertising what you're doing. And in most cases, in practice, the advertising nature will be obvious or will be evident from the circumstances. So in my view, for the advertising nature, in most cases, no labeling will be required. On the second part, there's also the question of whether you should be transparent in using AI in marketing. And as a rule of thumb, I would dare say that yes, you should, if you or this use is suitable or even intended to have an unfair impact on the market conditions. And you will also maybe be aware of the EU AI Act, which includes Article 52, where there is a specific transparency in obligation for certain systems, for certain AI systems. So certainly something you have to be mindful about to be transparent in the AI context. Always as appropriate and if needed under the circumstances. And the third one, which you see with a red circle here, and really a key one, I would say, key risk, is the part of inaccuracy, model hallucination, discrimination, and bias. And here, yeah, maybe Jeff, you can move to the next slide already.
Sure.
If you're talking about inaccuracy, and all this part of the discussion, it's really essential to keep in mind that the quality of the output depends really on the quality of the input. So whatever you input into the prompt will be reflected in some way in the output. And this in mind, and having having in mind the technical architecture and how the AI systems work, as previously mentioned by JJ, it's something you should really be aware of. So, and that also explains why we have this problem of inaccuracy and of bias and of model hallucination. So, with respect to ChatGPT, as you can see on the screen, they until recently they had a limitation section already, rather short-handed one that said listed several points to be aware of. One of them being that the knowledge they have is only up to 2021. That's something, of course, you should also have always keep in mind. And also the I mean, that there's the point of the model hallucination, that the problem there is that the AI tool can actually, or system can actually become confidentially wrong, and that's called the hallucination. So just fabricating facts which are not true after all. That's something you definitely have to keep in mind. But at the same time, from my perspective, it's always worth mentioning that nowadays, I would say the risk of inaccuracies is widely known in public, and to some extent, users really have to accept that and to deal with it. And from my perspective, a user cannot just come and blame and say, look, the AI system, and say, look, it's just wrong, it's inaccurate. Of course, you have to use it with some common sense, and don't misuse it. And here also some disclaimers as the one we see now, they are definitely helpful.
Do you think that regulators or courts will adopt that position? I mean, in the U.S., right, the kind of the standard is you kind of take consumers as they come, and if consumers are gullible and unthinking and are easily misled, then that's your fault, not their fault. And I guess, you know, I don't know, I think that from a U.S. perspective, and I'd be interested to hear what others think. I think that as advertisers start to adopt AI tools to be customer service tools, to as marketing tools where consumers can get, hey, give me the features of this product, or can the product do this, or how does this work? I think that at least from a U.S. perspective, it's much less likely that advertisers are going to get the benefit of the doubt here and say that consumers have this obligation to sort of look at this stuff skeptically. But do you think that people are going to approach it differently in Switzerland, for example?
Yes, I would say. I mean, there's at least a chance for such argumentation, I would say. And in my view, this really comes down to the term of the average consumer in the end. And in particular in Switzerland, we can say that we generally have a knowledgeable and informed and kind of sensitive consumer, or at least one can perceive a consumer as such, an average consumer. And maybe it's a bit different, let's say, in Germany. So that same wouldn't maybe apply to Germany or under German law. But I would be quite comfortable to go out with that argumentation and say, look, as a consumer, you just have to be aware of what is going on right now. If you're using such tools, you cannot just come and blame the provider or the advertiser. You have to take your share of responsibility. But of course, that's a personal view also. But under Swiss law, I would say it's fair to say that we have solid grounds for such argumentation.
What's your reaction to that, Honda?
Yeah, I mean, to start where Jonas left off, actually, I would also like to speak about the inaccuracy of the information provided by AI tools. So we also don't have any specific regulation in Turkey at the moment, but the advertising board reviewed some advertisements where the advertisers used AI tools as endorsers. So I have a few decisions which I would like to mention.
All right, let's hear it. We'll go to those. So let me just say, hold one sec. So just before we do that, let me see. We talked about this. Do you want to just Jonas? Do you want to talk before we get into that? Jonas, do you want to talk about?
I can make it. I can make it quick, of course.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
In the interest of time, but let's just focus on another part, on the bias part. Actually, what you can see and what you maybe are familiar with is the Amazon example, which is an example of what can go wrong in terms of bias, actually. So maybe you know that Amazon had a tool in place where they had resumes of job candidates analyzed. And there's this tool makes decisions, actually, or helped making decisions. And the problem there was that the AI tool that Amazon used, it discriminated against women because for technical roles they were looking for, because the data sets they used, or the training data, came from past CVs of within the Amazon, and they likely reflected the existing gender imbalance in Amazon's tech workforce. So, in other words, the AI prioritized patterns seen in male resumes and undervalued other things, basically terms as associated primarily with women, such as women's college or any activities women are or were involved. And that went very pretty wrong, and of course it caused a stir on social media and on media in general. And it resulted in Amazon scrapping actually the tool, taking it back from using it. And another part, by example of what can go wrong is a more recent one. Maybe you have heard of that. It's about Google Gemini, so the image creator of Google. And the problem there is, or was, that, or let's take a step back. So that the initial problem of AI tools in early stage was that they underrepresented people of color and diverse ethnic groups. And of course, Google tried to obviously correct that, but it was kind of an overcorrection in the end. So if Google Gemini was asked who the founding fathers of America were, you could see people of color depicted. And you could also see people of color as Nazi soldiers, and that caused quite a huge stir on social media as well. And Google actually had to pause Google Gemini.
Yeah. All right, thanks for this. All right, so Honda Hatsa from Gun Partners in Turkey. Talk a little bit about some of the decisions, because you're lucky enough to have, although you might not have any AI laws at this point, you do actually have a couple decisions.
Yeah, I mean, the decisions, usually they discuss about the accuracy of the information generated by AI, but I think these decisions are interesting. Three advertisers in Turkey, actually, they used AI tools, as endorsers for their advertisement claims. So in the first decision, all three decisions were made at the same time. So in the first one, LCY which is one of the biggest retail, like Turkey's Gap, actually. let me say that. So they use this claim. According to ChatGPT, LCY is Turkey's largest fashion retail brand. So they have used this claim and endorsed by ChatGPT. But the advertising board asked the same question to ChatGPT again, and this time ChatGPT changed the answer. And it says, I apologize, my latest data is until 2021, so I can't fully describe the current situation. In 2021, and LCY was one of the Turkey's largest fashion retails. However, competition changes rapidly in the fashion industry. So when the advertising board received this response, they understand that the answers are not up to date. Actually, Jonas already showed us that this is also a part of the terms and conditions of ChatGPT. But they didn't care about this, so it was confirmed that the answers are not up to date and they are not certain. So the claim was not properly substantiated. So the advertising board found this advertising as misleading. In the second one, the next slide, very similar actually. This time, this Namlungo, which is a logistic company, they used a similar claim. They said, we asked ChatGPT and got the only correct answer to conduct fast, secure, and cost-effective logistic transactions to any location in the world. Meet Namlungo now. So the advertising board again investigated this claim, asked the same question, and received a totally different answer. This time they received the answer that there are many companies providing such service, etc. So again, it was confirmed that the answers are not accurate, they are not certain, not up to date, so no proper substantiation. And then the last one, we see a TV channel, which is indeed actually one of the biggest and oldest TV channels in Turkey. But this time they asked the question and they used the claim, the most iconic private TV channel in Turkey. So they used this claim, but upon asking to ChatGPT the same question, this time they said that there can be many different views regarding the most iconic private channel, etc. So, in three of these decisions, the advertising board just said that these are misleading advertisements, and it also gives us the example, the concrete example, that the data provided by ChatGPT or any other AI tools are not updated. And actually these tools, I wouldn't say lie, but they make up some statements. So human oversight is a must, actually, using the output generated by AI. And actually, I asked this question to AI. I asked the question, what is the best prompt which we can give you to receive the most accurate questions? And even ChatGPT just underlines that human oversight is necessary. And actually, I would like to read that one. It says that humans can provide additional context and judgment that AI may lack. So I think, yes, this even AI just says that. So
well, it's interesting. I love the fact that the advertising board used ChatGPT to decide the cases as well. I think that there's quite a awesome aspect of that, which maybe we have to think about a little bit. But I do think if you fit this into a larger context, right? The concept that if you're going to use an endorser in advertising, I think it's a pretty common principle around the world that you can't use an endorser to make a claim that you couldn't make yourself, right? So if an endorser is making an objective claim about a company or about its products, performance, you would need to independently be able to substantiate that those claims are true and they reflect kind of general expected performance. I think that's number one. But the second, I think that these sort of series of cases also highlight is this notion that don't substantiate your advertising claims through ChatGPT, right? Yeah. That you can't necessarily rely on ChatGPT, but to provide you with definitive evidence. Certainly, fact finders aren't going to rely on it. Other really interesting case that came out of Canada recently was Air Canada was using an AI tool to provide customer service, and the customer wrote in and asked what the bereavement policies were. If I buy this ticket, can I apply for a refund or something after the fact? And the tool gave an incorrect answer, and then the customer wasn't in fact able to get the refund, and the customer sued, and the court agreed that that if you use AI, if Air Canada is using the AI tool and the AI tool gives the wrong answers, then they're liable for the incorrect information that was given. So very, 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 very interesting. It's interesting to see how these companies were using ChatGPT as essentially like an endorser or as a substitute for making the claims themselves, and how they ran themselves into trouble. Jonas, do you want to finish up this section? And you got another topic or two to quickly cover?
Yes, sure. Let's now have a look also at the AI-supported targeting and what the consumer protection issue is here. And the good news is that it's not illegal in my perspective per se, but it depends on the circumstances. And so if you do target your customers, and of course, meaning if you deliver advertising which most triggers purchasing based on consumers' needs and interests, and by exploiting their vulnerabilities, then the consumer protection issue there is if you do it in a way that you exploit that, as mentioned before, in a manner like a dark pattern. If you subliminally influence customers or consumers to something, or trick them into something they didn't really want to, then you have a potential problem under consumer protection law. And it can also be perceived as a, let's say, as a particularly aggressive sales method, depending on the circumstances. But in general, I would say it's legit, but you should be careful there. And yes, one of the big topics I mentioned initially, we didn't want to have focus on that for once. It's a lot of discussions still going on out there about data privacy and confidentiality. But of course, in a broader sense, it belongs to consumer protection also. So taking confidentiality, if you are an agency, for example, and you then you do owe certain obligations to your clients, and you have some access to potentially to some business sensitive information. You have to protect them, and of course, if you use AI with such data, you run the risk of breaching that confidentiality. And on the data privacy angle, there's also the risk of breaching data protection obligations to your clients if you are an agency, or to other individuals. So if you input client names or names of other individuals, you potentially have a problem under data protection laws. And the other part is that if you input that, then the data will be transferred, and it will most likely be transferred at some point to the US. And if you don't have any safeguards, any appropriate safeguards there, particularly if you don't have any DPA also concluded, or further safeguards necessary under the applicable law, then you have an issue. And the problem there is that maybe we can talk about that in the discussion part as well. But the problem is that a lot of tools out there, they don't really provide for a DPA or for contractual safeguards for the time being, but only enterprise solutions, which is good, but maybe also bad. We can talk about that in a bit. But certainly something you have to be mindful, the confidentiality, but also the data privacy when using AI also in marketing.
Great, thanks, Jonas. JJ, you're going to say a few words about the AI Act? Oh, you're on mute.
Of course I am. Really high level, but wouldn't be an AI seminar without himself, but essentially the AI Act is coming. Definitely something to put on your radar. This is the I think the European Commission finalised the text of this legislation earlier this year, and it's going to harmonise rules on what are termed AI systems based approach. So you have some AI use cases that are completely prohibited, so things like deploying social scoring or using subliminal techniques and to exploit vulnerabilities, like Jonas mentioned. You have these high risk systems which are allowed, but there are sort of compliance obligations, particularly if you're a deployer or a provider of that system. And then you have this sort of tiered level of compliance, whether you're deploying or providing or using a moderate risk system, a limited risk system, and some are not caught at all. But the focus is really on the safety and fundamental rights of EU citizens at its core. And I think it probably won't come into force until late 2025, maybe early 2026, after a 2-year implementation period. But this is probably the landmark piece of legislation regulating AI globally at the moment, I would say.
Okay, great. All right. So with a couple remaining minutes we have left, maybe we'll just do this. Maybe each one of you just could quickly give us a couple important tips as your clients start to work on it with AI, implement AI in connection with use of marketing. What are 2 or 3 things you're telling them to do to help stay out of trouble? Handa, go first.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is obvious that we will use AI. So, I mean, even the advertising board in Turkey, they use AI actually and they start a project with the help of AI. It's called AI-based social media ad scanning project. So, yeah, it is obvious that we have disadvantages. But of course, transparency is important, which Jonas already mentioned. And I think the decisions that I have presented shows that the information is not accurate. So, the accuracy of the information is also important. So we must be careful with the prompts we are using, and we must double check the information provided by output generated by AI tools. So ensure that there are no BAs, inaccuracies, or infringements. So the ethical use of AI is also important, to prevent any dark patterns. So yeah, I think these are the tips which I can give for now.
Jonas.
Thanks. It's hard for me now, and maybe it's even harder for JJ afterwards, hopefully, or maybe not. No, but I would say you should also focus on having some knowledge amongst your staff, so in-house. So you should train them on how to use AI properly, and what to do and what to not to do. And with that related, I would say it's also important to have some sort of AI policy within your company, whether you are an advertiser, an agency, or another company. Whenever you use AI, you should have some policy in place. And in this policy, I would recommend that you also include a provision where you say that every new tool should be vetted before it is used from different angles, as we heard before, from a data protection angle, but also from a consumer protection angle, and from an IP angle, of course. And maybe there is a small hint to what we do at Fisher. We do have actually in-house developed a generative AI risk assessment tool called Gaira, which you can see on visher.com/AI. You can download it there, and a lot of more information there as well. So I would say it's important to have compliance in place, but don't overdo it. So be reasonable and use AI, and use it with and have fun. They're using it.
Right. Thanks, JJ.
Well, I think maybe just on exactly, if we would focus on maybe back to IP, which is my topic for today, but that is definitely a concern for clients and agencies using it. They don't want to create any assets that infringe IP. So how do you reduce that? You could choose to just use AI in the ideation stage. So when you're at that creative stage, rather than actually using the exact assets that the AI creates, why not just use that as inspiration and then go back to old-fashioned methods and actually just create something using that as inspiration, because it's going to make it one sort of step removed and reduce the IP infringement risks. And then also, just in terms of being really careful with the prompts that you actually use, just don't use prompts that might encourage the algorithm to copy third-party content or create something in the style of something. You know, don't say, can I have a picture that looks like an Andy Warhol painting, or can I have a piece of music that sounds like Adele, because you're asking for trouble. So just be careful with the prompts you use in that sense, and it will help.
Yeah. I think one last thing I'll say, maybe as a tip, is transparency in all of its forms is one of the most important things to think about right now. If you think about internally in an organization, you know, if the people that you're working for, that are working for you, are using AI tools to create work product, you kind of want to know about that. And if you're doing work for another company, or another company is doing work for you, you kind of want to know what role AI is playing in that. And then when you think about it from a consumer perspective, if consumers are seeing content, you have to ask the question, is this content that they should know, you know, was created by AI, or if they don't know, you know, is it going to mislead them as well? So anyway, thanks to all of you. Very, very interesting. I think that I will look forward to getting us all back together a year or two from now and seeing how all the answers are different, because the world is changing so fast. But thanks again for doing this, and thanks to everyone who joined. And we'll look forward to seeing you in September for part 2. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.